The mining colony on Kepler 442b was burning when Han Sol woke up in the tunnel 3 levels below ground. The air tasted like smoke and death and something else he could not name. The emergency lights flickered red against the metal walls, making everything look like it was covered in blood. Han Sol had been sleeping in the deep tunnels for 2 days now, ever since the purple-skinned aliens had attacked the colony and killed everyone they could find. The screaming had stopped yesterday, but he still heard it in his head. The voices of people he knew. People he had tried to protect. Commander Han Sol was not supposed to be on this mining world. He was supposed to be back on Earth, training new Navy SEAL recruits. But his sister Min-ji had moved here with her family to start a new life. The colony needed security advisors, and Han Sol had taken leave to help them set up defenses. Nobody expected alien raiders to find them way out here. The attack came at dawn. 3 days ago, Han Sol had been teaching the colonists how to use basic weapons when the ships appeared in the sky. Purple and black vessels that moved like sharks through water. The aliens inside were tall and thin, with 4 arms and faces that looked like they were always smiling even when they were killing. Han Sol had fought them for 6 hours. He killed 12 of the purple aliens before his ammunition ran out. Then he grabbed 2 more with his bare hands and broke their necks before the others forced him to retreat into the mining tunnels. The colonists had not been so lucky. Now he sat in the darkness listening to the alien voices echoing from above. They were searching for survivors, but they were not trying very hard. Most of them seemed bored, like this was just another day at work. Han Sol counted at least 20 different voices, speaking in their strange, clicking language. His stomach growled, but he ignored it. Food could wait. Intel was more important. He had been watching these aliens for 2 days, learning their patterns. The purple ones were called Vorthons, and they worked for something called the Galactic Council. They were not here to steal resources or claim territory. They were hunting people. The Vorthons had portable cages made of energy fields. They were collecting survivors from different species across the galaxy. Han Sol had seen them load crying families into their ships before blasting off to find more victims. The question was why? What did they want with living prisoners on the 3rd day? Han Sol got his answer. The Vorthons were getting ready to leave. They had searched the colony thoroughly and found no more survivors. Their ships were loaded with stolen technology and a few prisoners they had found hiding. In other settlements, the purple aliens were laughing and celebrating like they had just won a game. Han Sol could have stayed hidden. He could have waited for them to leave and then used the colony emergency beacon to call for help. But that would take weeks, and by then the prisoners would be gone forever. His sister Min-ji was in one of those cages. Her husband Jae-sung and their baby daughter. So Ra were with her. The Vorthon commander was a big alien with scars across his face and metal implants in his skull. His name was Rock Tar, and he seemed to be in charge of the hunting party. Rock Tar was standing near the main ship talking to his soldiers about their next target when Han Sol made his move. Han Sol came up from the tunnels like a ghost. He had covered his body with mining dust to hide his heat signature and wrapped cloth around his feet to muffle his steps. The first Vorthon guard never saw him coming. Han Sol grabbed the alien from behind and snapped his neck with a quick twist. The second guard turned around just in time to see his partner fall. Han Sol was already moving. He drove his combat knife up under the alien's chin and into his brain. The guard dropped without making a sound. But the third guard was farther away, and he had time to shout a warning. The entire camp exploded into activity as Vorthons ran for their weapons. Han Sol could have kept fighting. He could have tried to free the prisoners and steal a ship, but he had counted the odds and they were not good. So instead, Han Sol did something that surprised everyone, including himself. He dropped his knife and raised his hands in surrender. The Vorthons surrounded him with energy weapons pointed at his chest. They were shouting in their clicking language and seemed confused about what to do. Roktar pushed through the crowd and stared down at the human who had just killed two of his soldiers. Roktar spoke in broken English that he had learned from previous human prisoners. "You killed my warriors," he said. "You are dangerous. Why do you surrender now?" Han Solo looked up at the alien commander and smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile a shark might give to a seal before attacking. "I want to see where you take the prisoners." He said, "I want to understand what you are doing to them." The Vorthan commander laughed. It was a harsh sound, like metal scraping against metal. "You think you can rescue them? You think you can fight your way out of our arena? Han Solo filed that word away for later study. So that was what this was about. Entertainment. The Galactic Council was collecting different species to fight each other for sport. It made sense in a sick way. These aliens had probably never seen a human fight. Before they wanted to test what Earth people could do against their champions. Roktar ordered his soldiers to put energy shackles on Han Solo's hands and feet. The metal felt cold against his skin, and he could feel electricity running through it, trying to shock him if he moved too fast. But Han Solo had been tortured before during his SEAL training. He knew how to ignore pain and wait for the right moment. They threw him into a cargo hold with the other prisoners. The space was dark and cramped, and smelled like fear. There were about 30 different alien species crammed together. Some he recognized from Earth databases, but most were completely new. The only thing they had in common was the look of hopeless terror in their eyes. Minji was there with her family. She cried when she saw him and tried to hug him, but the energy shackles shocked them both when they got too close. Jae Sung just stared at the floor, like his spirit was already broken. Little So Ra was too young to understand what was happening, but she could feel the fear from the adults around her. The other prisoners whispered stories about the arena. Some had been there before, and survived 1 or 2 fights before being recaptured. They talked about champions who could not be defeated and crowds that cheered for blood. They said the Galactic Council had been running these games for thousands of years. Han Solo listened to everything, but he did not speak. He spent his time studying the ship instead, every time a guard came to check on them. He memorized their routine. He counted how many steps it took to walk from the prison hold to different parts of the ship. He noted which guards were lazy and which ones were alert. The journey to the arena world took 2 weeks. During that time, Han Solo did push-ups and sit-ups in his tiny space. He practiced meditation techniques to keep his mind sharp. He even made friends with some of the other prisoners, especially a small blue alien named Kildu, who had been a soldier. Before his capture, Kildu told him about the arena layout and the different types of fighters they would face. The blue alien had survived 3 matches before getting captured again during a failed escape attempt. He gave Han Solo advice about fighting in low gravity and dealing with alien biology, but most importantly, Kildu told him about the arena hierarchy. The fighters who won enough matches got better food and private cells. The ones who became champions got to meet with council members and attend special events, and the grand champion got access to restricted areas of the station. Han Solo smiled when he heard this. The Galactic Council thought they were getting a new gladiator for their games. They had no idea they had just brought a predator into their nest. A predator who was already planning how to work his way up their food chain until he could reach the ones at the top. When they finally arrived at Arena Station, Omega Han Solo got his first look at the massive structure. Through a small window, the station was bigger than most Earth cities, with huge towers and domes that glowed with artificial light. Millions of aliens lived and worked there, all of them part of the great entertainment machine Roktar came to get him personally when it was time to disembark. The Vorthan commander seemed excited about delivering such an interesting new fighter. "You will die well human," he said. "The crowd will enjoy watching you struggle." Han Solo looked at his sister one last time as they dragged him away. She was crying, but he could see something else in her eyes. Hope she knew her brother was not giving up. She knew he had a plan as they marched him through the station's corridors toward the gladiator holding cells Han. Sol counted guard positions and noted security cameras. He memorized the layout and identified potential weapons. Everything he saw was stored away for later use. The other gladiators in the holding area looked at him with curiosity. Most had never seen a human before. They whispered among themselves, trying to guess how long this new fighter would last. Some bet he would die in his first match. Others thought he might survive 2 or 3 fights. But Han Solo was not thinking about surviving. He was thinking about winning. Not just his fights, but the whole game. The Galactic Council wanted to see what humans could do in their arena. They were about to get a demonstration they would never forget. The hunt was about to begin. The arena floor was covered in old blood that had turned black under the burning lights. Han Solo stepped into the massive space and looked up at 200,000 screaming aliens. The noise hit him like a physical wall sound that wanted to crush his spirit. Before the fight even began, his first opponent was already waiting in the center. The creature called itself Thul Duk, and it stood 8 feet tall on 6 insect legs. Its body was covered in natural armor that looked like green. Metal plates. 4 arms ended in claws that could slice through steel. 2 more arms held energy blades that hummed with deadly power. The crowd was betting heavily against the human. Most aliens had never seen Earth people fight before, they thought. Han Solo looked small and weak compared to the Krex warrior. The odds were 100 to 1 that he would die in the first minute. Han Solo had been given basic gladiator armor, a chest plate that was more for show than protection. Arm guards that might stop a glancing blow-leg armor that was too loose and would slow him down. The arena masters wanted their fighters to look impressive, but they also wanted them to die quickly for the crowd's entertainment. The betting was closing, and the announcer was building excitement. Vel Shah was a creature with 12 tentacles and a voice that could be heard across the entire station. She described Thul Duk as an unbeatable warrior who had killed 30 prisoners in the past year. She called Han Solo fresh meat from a primitive world. But Han Solo was not listening to the crowd or the announcer. He was studying his opponent and the arena itself. The floor was covered in sand to soak up blood, but underneath was solid metal. The walls were smooth, with no handholds. The only weapons were what the fighters brought with them during his 2 weeks on the transport ship. Han Solo had accessed the arena database through a maintenance terminal. Most guards thought prisoners were too stupid to use technology. But Han Solo had been hacking computer systems since he was a teenager. He had watched recordings of hundreds of previous fights. The Krex species was dangerous, but they had weaknesses. Their compound eyes could see movement very well, but they had blind spots on their sides. Their natural armor was strong in front, but thinner on the back and sides. They relied on powerful forward charges to overwhelm opponents. Most importantly, Krex warriors were proud. They expected enemies to either run away or charge directly at them. They had trouble adapting when opponents used unexpected tactics. The 30 prisoners Thul Duk had killed were probably too scared or too desperate to think clearly. The battle horn sounded, and 20,000 aliens fell silent, waiting for blood. Thul Duk did exactly what Han Solo expected. He lowered his head and charged forward with his energy blades raised. The arena floor shook under his 6 legs as he built up speed. His claws dug into the sand, leaving deep gouges behind him. Han Solo dropped to one knee and scooped up a handful of arena sand. As the Krex warrior thundered toward him, he rolled sideways at the last possible second. Thul Duk's massive body swept past him, missing by inches. The creature tried to turn, but his momentum carried him several more steps. While Thul Duk was off balance, Han Solo sprang to his feet and threw the sand directly into the warrior's compound eyes. The tiny grains stuck to the creature's visual organs, blinding him. Temporarily, Thul Duk shrieked and swung his energy blades wildly, trying to hit an enemy. He could not see. Han Solo was already behind him. The Krek's warrior's armor was thick on his chest and arms, but the neck joint where his head connected to his body was only protected by overlapping plates. There was a gap just wide enough for a blade to slip through. The human grabbed one of Thuldok's energy weapons as the creature flailed blindly. With a quick upward thrust, he drove the blade through the gap in the neck armor. The energy weapon sliced through alien flesh and bone, cutting the warrior's spinal cord. Thuldok collapsed face first into the sand. Green blood pooled around his body as his 6 legs twitched and went still. The entire fight had lasted less than 1 minute, but not the way anyone expected. The arena fell completely silent. 200,000 aliens stared at the small humans standing over their champion. Nobody moved. Nobody even seemed to breathe. The silence stretched on until it became more frightening than the earlier noise. Then one alien in the crowd started clapping. Others joined in slowly, at first then faster, until the entire arena was thundering with applause. They were not cheering for Han Solo exactly. They were cheering for the unexpected entertainment he had provided. Most gladiator matches were boring and predictable. This one had been different. In the luxury boxes high above the arena floor, council members who had been drinking and chatting casually were now paying attention. Several of them leaned forward to get a better look at the human who had just killed their champion so efficiently. Arena Master Hyuk Jin was a tall creature with blue skin and silver eyes. He had been running gladiator games for 50 years and had seen thousands of fighters come and go, but he had never seen a new prisoner defeat a veteran warrior with such skill. The human had not just won, he had made it look easy down in the arena. Han Solo raised his arms to acknowledge the crowd's cheers, but his eyes were not on the spectators. He was looking up at the luxury boxes, studying the faces of the council members who ran this place. These were his real targets, the ones responsible for turning murder into entertainment. The cleanup crew was already dragging Thuldok's body away. They moved fast because the next fight was scheduled to start in 10 minutes. Blood sports were a business, and business had to keep moving. Han Solo was escorted back to the gladiator holding area by guards who were no longer laughing at him. The other prisoners stared at him with new expressions. Some looked hopeful for the first time in months. If this human could kill a Krek's champion, maybe there was a chance for all of them. Others looked terrified because they realized Han Solo was not just another victim. He was something much more dangerous. Kildu, the small blue alien who had befriended him during the journey, was waiting in the holding cell. His large eyes were wide with amazement. "You made that look easy," he whispered. "How did you know about the neck joint?" Han Solo sat down on his narrow bunk and began cleaning green blood from under his fingernails. "I studied the recordings," he said quietly. "Every species has weak points. You just have to know where to look, but that was not the whole truth." Han Solo had not just studied Krek's anatomy. He had studied the entire arena system, the betting patterns, the crowd psychology, the way council members reacted to different types of fights. He was gathering intelligence for a much larger operation. The guards were talking among themselves in the corridor. Han Solo could hear them through the energy barrier that sealed his cell. They were nervous now, instead of joking about the weak human. They were wondering how dangerous he might really be. Fear was starting to replace their earlier confidence. That night, Han Solo lay on his bunk and stared at the ceiling. He was thinking about his sister Minji and her family somewhere else in this massive station. He was thinking about all the other prisoners who had died in this arena for the entertainment of creatures who saw killing as sport. But mostly he was thinking about his next fight. The arena masters would not underestimate him again. They would send something bigger and more dangerous to face him. That was exactly what he wanted. Each victory would bring him closer to the top of their hierarchy. The crowd had cheered for him today, but they would cheer just as loudly when he died. That was the nature of these people. They did not care who won or lost. They just wanted to see blood and violence. The more spectacular, the better, Han Solo smiled in the darkness of his cell. Tomorrow he would give them another show, but he would not be the one bleeding on the arena floor. The Galactic Council wanted to test what humans could do in combat. They were about to learn that some tests were more dangerous than others. The hunt had begun, and Han Solo had just claimed his first trophy. But this was only the beginning. The real prey was still hiding in their luxury boxes, thinking they were safe behind their energy shields and armed guards. They had no idea that death was already climbing toward them, one victory at a time. In the morning they would send him another opponent, and he would kill that one too. Each death would make him stronger in the eyes of the crowd and more valuable to the arena masters. They thought they were breaking him down, but really they were building him up. Soon he would be strong enough to reach the ones at the top, and when that day came, the hunters would finally understand what it felt like to be prey. Word about the human spread through Arena Station Omega like a virus. By the time Han Solo faced his second opponent 3 days later, the betting odds had changed dramatically. He was no longer seen as easy prey. The crowd wanted to see if his first victory was skill or just luck. His second fight was against a Mechtan poison spitter called Zil-Rak. The creature looked like a giant lizard with a swollen throat sac that could spray acid strong enough to melt through metal armor. Most fighters tried to keep their distance from Mechtan warriors, but distance meant death in the arena. The acid could reach anywhere. Han Solo had spent those 3 days doing more than just resting. He had been talking to the maintenance workers who cleaned his cell. The arena employed thousands of different alien species to keep the facility running. Most were slaves or conquered peoples who hated their council masters, but were too afraid to rebel. The maintenance crews knew every inch of the arena, including systems the fighters never saw. Underground, there were cooling pipes, waste disposal channels, and emergency vents. The arena floor itself was more complex than it appeared, with hidden mechanisms for special effects during important fights. During his second fight, Han Solo used this knowledge for the first time. When Zil-Rak opened his throat sac to spray acid, Han Solo was already rolling toward a specific spot on the arena floor. His weight triggered a hidden pressure plate that released a jet of coolant gas directly into the creature's mouth. The sudden cold made Zil-Rak throat muscles seize up. The acid that should have killed Han Solo instead backed up in the creature's system, burning through his internal organs. The Mechtan warrior collapsed, choking on his own poison, while the crowd cheered at what they thought was incredible luck. But the arena masters were starting to understand that luck had nothing to do with it. Security Chief Dal Su reviewed recordings of both fights and noticed that Han Solo always seemed to know exactly where to move. He was either incredibly intelligent or he had inside help. Either possibility was dangerous. For his third fight, they decided to end the problem. The arena masters arranged a triple threat match. 3 opponents at once, attacking from different angles with different abilities. No amount of skill or inside knowledge could help against those odds. The human would finally die, and the crowd would see that Earth people were not as special as his first 2 victories suggested. The 3 creatures chosen for this execution were each deadly in their own way. The shard beast had diamond-hard skin that could not be cut or pierced. The flame worm breathed superheated gas that could melt metal. The Void Stalker could phase in and out of reality, making it almost impossible to hit. Standing in the arena, surrounded by 3 killing machines, Han Solo felt the weight of 200,000 alien eyes watching him. The crowd was excited because this fight promised to be spectacular. One way or another, the human would provide entertainment. The battle horns sounded and chaos erupted. The flame worm was the first to attack, opening its mouth to release a stream of fire hot, enough to turn sand into glass. But Han Solo was already moving toward another pressure plate hidden in the arena floor. As the creature breathed fire, Han Solo triggered a coolant system directly beneath it. The sudden temperature change caused the flame worm internal organs to shut down. The creature that lived by breathing fire suddenly could not breathe at all. It collapsed, gasping and choking, while its own flames died in its throat. The Void Stalker tried to use its phasing ability to attack. From an impossible angle, it materialized directly behind Han Solo, with claws extended to tear through his spine. But Han Solo had been counting the creature's phase cycles. Every time it became solid again, there was a brief moment when it could not. Phase out, Han Solo spun around and grabbed the Void Stalker by the throat at the exact moment it became solid. His combat training had taught him where to apply pressure to break alien neck structures. The creature tried to phase away, but it was already too late. That left only the shard beast with its impenetrable diamond skin charging across the arena floor like a living boulder. Its hide could stop energy weapons, and its claws could slice through steel armor. Nothing in the arena could penetrate its natural defenses. But Han Solo had noticed something while studying recordings of previous fights. Every creature had to breathe, and breathing meant openings. When the shard beast opened its mouth to roar, Han Solo was ready with the acid. Sacks he had torn from the dead flame worm. The acid that could melt through metal armor worked just as well on internal organs. The shard beast diamond skin meant nothing when the attack came from inside. It collapsed with green foam pouring from its mouth, while the crowd went wild. Standing alone among three corpses, Han Solo raised his bloodied arms to the crowd, but his real attention was focused on the luxury boxes where he could see council members standing and pointing at him. Their casual entertainment had become something they had not expected. Arena Master Hyuk Jin was no longer smiling. The blue-skinned creature was talking rapidly to his assistants and pointing at display screens showing analysis of the fight. This human was not. Following the normal patterns, prisoners were supposed to get weaker and more desperate as they fought more matches. This one seemed to be getting stronger in the gladiator holding area. The other prisoners looked at Han Solo with a mixture of hope and fear-hope, because he proved that the arena champions could be beaten. Fear because of the cold, efficient way he killed without hesitation or mercy. Kill-Do approached him carefully as Han Solo cleaned alien blood from his hands. 3 opponents. At once he whispered, "That should have been impossible. How did you know about the coolant systems?" Han Solo looked at his small blue friend and made a decision that would change everything. "I did not just know about the coolant systems," he said quietly. "I know about all the systems. Every hidden mechanism, every secret passage, every weakness in this entire station." The other prisoners gathered around to listen. Some were veteran gladiators who had survived dozens of fights. Others were newer arrivals, still traumatized by their capture. All of them had given up hope of ever seeing freedom again, but Han Solo offered them something they had not felt in years, a real chance to fight back. Not just survive one more day in the arena, but actually strike at the system that had enslaved them. The maintenance workers who cleaned their cells were already part of his network. Now he needed fighters. The plan he outlined was ambitious and dangerous. It would require precise timing, perfect coordination, and the willingness to die for something greater than personal survival. Many of the prisoners would not survive, but those who did would see their captors destroyed. Some gladiators refused to join. They had been broken by years of captivity and could not imagine victory. Others were too afraid of the consequences if they failed. The arena masters did not just kill rebels. They tortured them slowly as examples to others, but enough agreed to make the plan possible. Veteran fighters who still had strength left former soldiers who remembered what it meant to fight for something other than entertainment. Even some of the maintenance workers volunteered to take active roles despite having no combat training, as the group dispersed to begin preparations. Han Solo felt something he had not experienced since the attack on his sister's colony. A sense of purpose that went beyond simple survival. The Galactic Council had created this arena system to break the spirits of conquered peoples. Now that system would be turned against them. The next morning brought news that made Han Solo smile. arena officials announced that his next opponent would be Grell the Destroyer, the station's undefeated champion, a 12-foot-tall monster with cybernetic enhancements who had never lost a single fight in 300 matches. The crowd was already excited about this ultimate test. The betting was heavy, with most aliens wagering that the human would finally meet his match, but Han Solo was not worried about Grell. He was thinking about what would happen after the champion fell, because when the greatest fighter in the arena was defeated by a human, the psychological impact on the crowd would be devastating. The invincible system they believed in would crack, and through that crack, Han Solo would pour everything he had. The real fight was not going to be in the arena. It was going to be in the corridors and control rooms and luxury boxes where the council members thought they were safe. The gladiator matches were just the opening act. The main event was about to begin. Grell the Destroyer was a nightmare made flesh. Standing 12 feet tall and weighing over 1,000 pounds, he was more machine than living creature. His natural exoskeleton had been replaced with military-grade armor plating his right arm. Was a cannon that could punch holes through starship hulls. His left hand ended in claws that could slice through solid steel in 300 fights spanning 15 years. Grell had never been defeated. He had killed over 2,000 prisoners, from dozens of different species. The crowd called him invincible, and the betting pools reflected that confidence. Nobody thought the human could survive more than a few minutes against such a monster. But Han Solo had not spent the week before this fight training or resting. Instead, he had been implementing the most ambitious part of his plan. The network of maintenance workers and sympathetic staff he had built was finally ready to act. They had been placing small charges near critical systems and preparing for coordinated sabotage across the entire station. The plan was simple in concept but required perfect timing. When the lights went out during his fight with Grell, dozens of his allies would strike simultaneously. Security systems would fail, prisoner transport would be disrupted, and chaos would spread through the station. In that chaos, Han Solo would disappear and begin hunting the council members who had created this horror. As he walked into the arena for what everyone expected to be his final fight, Han Solo felt strangely calm. The crowd of 300,000 aliens was the largest he had faced. Their roar was deafening, but he had learned to use the noise to focus his mind rather than distract it. Grell was already waiting in the center of the arena. His cybernetic eye glowed red as it scanned the human opponent. Data scrolled across his visual display, showing Han Solo's height, weight, estimated combat capability, and probability of survival. The numbers were not encouraging for the human. The champion spoke in a voice like grinding metal. "You have impressed the crowd, little meat," he rumbled. "But your luck ends today. I will make your death slow so they can savor it." Han Solo looked up at the towering monster and smiled. It was the same cold expression that had worried his SEAL instructors during training. The smile of someone who enjoyed dangerous work. "Your cybernetics are impressive," he said. "But I wonder how well they work without power before Grell." Could ask what that meant. The arena lights flickered and went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red shadows. The crowd began to murmur nervously as technical difficulties were announced over the speaker system. But this was no accident. Every power relay feeding the arena had been simultaneously overloaded by maintenance workers following Han Solo instructions. In the confusion, Han Solo vanished into the shadows beneath the arena. Seating his allies had prepared climbing, equipment, and emergency supplies in hidden locations throughout the facility. While security forces rushed to restore power, Han Solo was already moving through the ventilation system toward his first target. Grell stomped around the darkened arena floor, his enhanced sensors scanning for the missing human. But those same cybernetic systems that made him deadly in combat also made him dependent on the station's power grid. Without full power, His targeting systems were running on backup batteries. That would not last long when the lights finally came back on. 10 minutes later, Grelmar was alone in the arena. The crowd erupted in confusion and anger. They had paid to see a fight, not watch a prisoner escape. Security Chief Dalsu was screaming orders over the communication system while armed guards poured into the facility. But Han Sol was no longer thinking about the arena. He was hunting. His first target was Council Member Su Jin, a member of the Helix species who had made her fortune, betting on gladiator deaths. Her private quarters were located in the luxury section of the station, protected by energy shields and automated defenses. Han Sol reached her rooms through a maintenance shaft that the architects had never intended for combat access. The Helix woman was counting profits from the evening's betting pools when a human hand reached through her ventilation grate. She had just enough time to see cold eyes looking at her before a combat knife ended her greed forever. Her bodyguards found her body 20 minutes later, along with a message written in her own blood on the wall. "The hunt begins," it said in perfect Galactic standard script. The human was not just killing randomly. He was sending a message to the other. Council members, Arena Master, Hyuk Jin was next. He had sealed himself in the arena control room thinking he would be safe behind blast doors and security screens. But Han Sol maintenance worker allies had given him access codes and detailed floor plans. The blue-skinned creature died at his own control console while trying to activate the station's self-destruct system. By the time the surviving council members realized they were being systematically hunted, 3 more of their number were dead. Each killing was more brutal than the last, and each was accompanied by evidence that the human knew exactly who they were and what crimes they had committed. Security footage showed only glimpses of a figure moving through shadows, always staying. Ahead of the search teams, the few guards who encountered him directly did not survive to give detailed reports. The human had turned their own station into a hunting ground, and they were the prey. Grand Administrator Ye Jin called an emergency meeting of the surviving council members in the station's most secure conference room. The room was protected by multiple layers of energy shields and guarded by the best soldiers available. But even there, the council members jumped at every sound and watched. The shadows with terrified eyes. "We underestimated this human," Ye Jin said, her voice shaking with barely controlled panic. "He is not just a skilled fighter. He has been planning this from the moment we captured him. The gladiator matches were just a distraction, while he built a network of supporters throughout our station." Security Chief Dalsu disagreed. His species had never known fear, and he refused to start. Now, one human cannot defeat our entire security force. He declared, "We will flood the station with armed patrols and hunt him down like the animal he is." But when Dalsu led 50 of his best soldiers into the lower levels to corner Han Sol, they found themselves facing not just one escaped prisoner, but dozens of freed gladiators. Armed with stolen weapons, the battle was fierce but brief. When the smoke cleared, Dalsu and most of his forces were dead. The few survivors who escaped brought word that the human had somehow organized a full-scale rebellion. Former prisoners who had been broken by years of captivity were now fighting with desperate courage. The station's security forces were outnumbered and outmaneuvered by enemies who knew every corridor and maintenance tunnel in his temporary command post deep in the station's engineering section. Han Sol studied tactical displays showing the progress of his revolution. The freed prisoners had taken control of 3 detention levels and were advancing toward the luxury quarters. Security forces were in full retreat, and many alien workers were openly joining the rebellion. But Han Sol was not satisfied with a simple prisoner uprising that would eventually fail when council reinforcements arrived from other systems. His real goal was to destroy the leadership completely and send a message that would be heard across the galaxy. Standing over a map of the station, Han Sol marked the locations where the remaining council members were hiding. His network of informants told him exactly which safe rooms they had fled to. And what defenses protected them? The hunt was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The most important targets were still alive, and Han Sol had saved the best for last Grand Administrator. Ye Jin would watch all her colleagues die before facing judgment herself. The Galactic Council had wanted to test human capabilities in their arena. Now they were getting a demonstration of what Earth people could do when they stopped playing by alien rules. The prey had become the predator, and there was nowhere left to hide. Panic spread through Arena Station Omega like poison in the water supply council members who had spent decades feeling completely safe, now barricaded themselves behind energy shields and prayed to their various gods. The human had become a ghost that could appear anywhere at any time, leaving only death in his wake. Han Sol moved through the station service tunnels like a predator stalking wounded prey. His network of maintenance workers and freed prisoners fed him constant intelligence about council member locations, security patrol routes, and defensive preparations. Every alien on the station was either helping him or terrified of him. Council member Hyuk Jin tried to escape to his private starship, but found the hangar bay doors. Sealed shut, Han Sol had thought of everything. The Zephyr species male spent his final moments trapped in his own luxury vessel, while the human cut through the hull with a plasma torch. Hyuk Jin died screaming as depressurization tore his body apart. The other council members heard his death screams over the communication system before Han Sol cut the feed. The message was clear. Nobody was safe. No hiding place was secure. The hunt would continue until every one of them was dead. Arena Master Kyung-ho sealed himself in the Gladiator Medical Bay, thinking that the heavily armored facility would protect him. The Vorthon had been responsible for capturing thousands of sentient beings for the games, and had personally selected the most promising fighters for special torture. His crimes were written in the blood of innocence, but Han Sol did not try to break down the medical bay doors. Instead, he simply shut off the air recycling system and waited. The facility that Kyung-ho thought would protect him became his tomb. As oxygen levels dropped, the Arena Master grew desperate enough to try breaking out himself. Han Sol was waiting when the doors finally opened. The remaining council members could hear Kyung-ho final gasps over the intercom. System before silence fell like a blanket of death. Fear was no longer an emotion they felt occasionally. It had become their constant companion, driving them to make desperate and stupid decisions. Security forces throughout the station were deserting their posts. Rather than face the human and his growing army of rebels, many guards simply abandoned their weapons and fled toward the civilian sections. Some tried to steal small ships and escape the station entirely. Others hid among the maintenance crews, hoping to blend in with the workers. Han Sol used their fear as a weapon. Broadcasting messages through the station's communication system, he offered amnesty to any security personnel who laid down their arms and refused to protect the council members. The smart ones accepted immediately. The stubborn ones died when his rebel forces overran their positions. By the end of the second day of his revolution, Han Sol controlled over half the station. His forces had freed every prisoner in the detention levels and were advancing steadily toward the luxury quarters where the surviving council members were trapped. The revolution had become an avalanche that nothing could stop. But Han Sol was not interested in a general uprising that would eventually burn itself out. He wanted to send a specific message to the galaxy. The individuals responsible for the Gladiator system would be held personally accountable for their crimes. Their deaths would be broadcast to every world under council. Control Council member Su Jin of the Helix species had been the first to die, but her death was quick compared to what Han Sol had planned for the others. He wanted the remaining council members to experience the same terror their victims had felt, the same hopelessness, the same knowledge that death was coming and nothing could prevent it. The third target was Treasury Minister Dal Su, a creature whose greed had helped fund the arena system for decades. The Krex male had calculated that each prisoner death generated an average profit of 10,000 credits. He treated sentient lives like numbers in an accounting ledger. Han Solo found Dal Su in the treasury vault, surrounded by energy shields and automated defense turrets. The Krex minister thought his wealth could protect him, but money meant nothing to a dead man. Han Solo used shaped charges provided by his maintenance worker allies to breach the vault walls. When the smoke cleared, Dal Su was cowering behind stacks of credit chips and precious metals. His natural armor was cracked and his compound eyes were wide with terror. He offered Han Solo everything he owned, if the human would spare his life. Han Solo looked at the creature who had profited from so much death and felt only cold satisfaction. Your victims never had a chance to buy their lives, he said before ending Dal Su's existence with a single precise strike. The treasury vault became a tomb filled with worthless wealth. The psychological warfare was working perfectly. Each death sent shockwaves through the remaining council members. They began turning on each other, arguing about whose fault the crisis was and who should take responsibility. Some suggested surrendering to the human, others wanted to activate the station's self-destruct system and take everyone with them, but Grand Administrator Ye Jin maintained iron control over her subordinates. The ancient Epsilon class being had ruled the gladiatorial empire for 2 centuries, and she was not about to let one human destroy everything she had built. Her species was known for ruthless intelligence and long-term planning. Ye Jin had been studying recordings of Han Solo attacks, looking for patterns and weaknesses. The human was skilled, but he was still just one person fighting against overwhelming odds. If she could force him into a direct confrontation on ground of her choosing, she might still win. The Grand Administrator began moving the surviving council members to the station's central citadel, a fortress within a fortress designed to withstand siege warfare. The citadel had its own power supply, water recycling, and food storage. It could hold out for months while reinforcements were summoned from other systems. But Han Solo had anticipated this move. His spy network included maintenance workers who had helped build the citadel and knew all its secrets. More importantly, he had been preparing a surprise that would turn Ye Jin's greatest strength into her final weakness as the council members sealed themselves into their fortress. Han Solo was already inside waiting for them. He had been smuggled in days earlier, hidden among supplies being delivered to the Citadel's storage areas. His maintenance worker allies had provided him with detailed maps and access codes. The hunters had become the hunted, and they did not even know it. Yet standing in the shadows of the Citadel's main corridor, Han Solo checked his weapons and reviewed his final assault plan. 7 council members remained alive, but not for much longer. Each would die in a way that reflected their specific crimes against innocent beings. The real hunt was about to begin, and this time there would be no escape. The Grand Administrator thought she was safe behind her walls and weapons, but she had made one fatal mistake. She had brought all her remaining allies into the same place where Han Solo could kill them efficiently. The revolution was entering its final phase, and soon the galaxy would know that the Galactic Council's reign of terror was over. The gladiator system that had claimed millions of lives would die with its creators, and the universe would be a little bit safer. Han Solo smiled in the darkness and began to move. The council members were about to learn what their victims had always known, that sometimes the prey fights back, and when it does, the hunters become the hunted. Grand Administrator Ye Jin stood in the center of her fortress citadel, surrounded by the last 5 surviving council members and her most loyal guards. The ancient Epsilon class being had ruled the gladiatorial empire for 2 centuries, but now her empire was crumbling around her like a house built on sand. The citadel was supposed to be impregnable. Multiple layers of energy shields protected it from outside attack. Automated defense systems could repel an army. The walls were made of compressed neutronium that could withstand direct hits from starship weapons. But all these defenses were designed to keep enemies out, not to trap them inside with their intended victims. Han Solo had been hiding in the Citadel's maintenance areas for 3 days, waiting for all the council members to gather in one place. His network of allies had smuggled him inside along with weapons and supplies. Everything was ready for the final act of his bloody revolution. Through security cameras, he watched the council members argue among themselves about how to handle the crisis. Some wanted to negotiate with the human, offering him wealth or freedom in exchange for ending his killing spree. Others demanded that they activate the station's self-destruct system and take the rebel forces with them. But Ye Jin had a different plan. The Grand Administrator had discovered something during her analysis of Han Solo attack patterns. The human was not just randomly killing council members, he was working his way up the hierarchy, saving the most important targets for last. His ultimate goal was clearly to reach her. She decided to use this knowledge as a trap. If Han Solo wanted to face her personally, she would give him that opportunity. But it would be on her terms, in a place of her choosing, surrounded by every advantage she could arrange. The Grand Administrator ordered her guards to spread throughout the Citadel, creating multiple defensive positions. The surviving council members were placed in the most secure area while she waited in the central command chamber. This room was protected by the strongest shields and had multiple escape routes if needed, but Han Solo was not planning a direct assault. Instead, he began killing the guards, one by one, using stealth and misdirection. A maintenance hatch would open silently in a corridor ceiling, and a knife would find its target before anyone could react. By the time other guards arrived, the human was already gone. The psychological effect was devastating. Guards who had seemed confident and professional began jumping at shadows. They fired at imaginary enemies and abandoned their posts when equipment made unexpected noises. The Citadel, that was supposed to be their strongest defense, became a maze of Terror Council member Jin Woo was the first to break under the pressure. The Helix species male had been responsible for designing new torture methods for the Gladiator medical facilities. His experiments had caused agonizing deaths for thousands of prisoners. Now he faced his own mortality with the same terror his victims had experienced. Jin Woo tried to escape through a service tunnel, thinking he could reach the hangar bay and steal a ship. But Han Solo was waiting for him. In the darkness, the council member died slowly, with plenty of time to contemplate his crimes before the end finally came. The remaining council members heard Jin Woo's screams echoing through the ventilation system before communication was cut. The human was not just killing them, he was making sure they understood exactly what fate awaited each of them. Their victims had screamed just as loudly and received just as little mercy. By the 4th day of the siege, only 3 council members remained. Alive besides Ye Jin herself, the Citadel guards had been reduced from 50 elite soldiers to less than a dozen terrified survivors who stayed huddled together rather than risk patrolling. Alone Han Solo decided it was time to end the psychological warfare and begin the final confrontation. He used the Citadel's own communication system to broadcast a message directly to the surviving council members. His voice echoed through every corridor and chamber in the fortress. "You have spent your lives treating other beings as entertainment," he said calmly. "You have profited from torture and death. You have turned murder into a business. Now you will learn what your victims felt in their final moments. You will know true fear before you die." The message continued with specific details about each council member's crimes. The human had done his research thoroughly. He knew exactly who was responsible for what, and he was prepared to deliver personalized justice to each of them. Grand Administrator Ye Jin listened to the broadcast with growing understanding. This was never about simple revenge. The human was conducting a war crimes tribunal with himself as judge, jury, and executioner. He saw the gladiatorial system as a crime against all sentient life and its creators as criminals who deserved death. She realized that negotiation was impossible and escape was unlikely. The human would not stop until every council member was dead and the entire gladiatorial system was destroyed. He was not fighting for personal gain or political power. He was fighting for a principle that made him far more dangerous than any normal enemy. The final confrontation came at dawn on the 5th day. Han Solo appeared in the central command chamber like a ghost. Materializing from shadow, the surviving council members were there along with the last 8 guards and Grand Administrator Ye Jin herself. The ancient being looked at the human who had destroyed her empire and felt something she had not experienced. In centuries' genuine respect, this small creature from a primitive world had accomplished what entire species had failed to.